Part 5. Into the Abyss. Hannah's scream hung in the stale air, bouncing off the stone walls as we tore through the narrow corridors, shadows closing in around us. I could hear the others' panicked breaths echoing my own, every step an agonizing reminder that there was no real plan, only escape, if escape was even possible. Every nerve in my body felt raw, frayed by the oppressive weight of the darkness that seemed to pulse with life, its intent only inches from our heels. I clutched Hannah's hand tightly, her fingers cold and trembling in mine. I wanted to reassure her, tell her that we'd find a way out, that this nightmare would end. But I couldn't speak. The only sound that escaped my lips was the gasping of air between each desperate step, my mind blank with terror. Then I saw a faint glow around the next bend. My heart surged with hope. Maybe, just maybe, it was the light from the tunnel's entrance. We couldn't be that far in, could we? We rounded the corner, almost crashing into Max, who had stopped dead in his tracks. He was staring at the light source with wide, disbelieving eyes. It wasn't the entrance. It was a room. It was larger than the chambers we'd seen before, its walls covered in the same twisted symbols that we'd passed, but here they were meticulously painted in what looked like dark red stains that had dried in streaks, as if painted with trembling hands. In the center of the room was an ancient, crumbling altar made of rough stone, barely illuminated by a dim, flickering lantern. It cast a sickly, yellowish light that barely penetrated the shadows. On the altar lay a pile of objects, a mix of strange, ancient artifacts and personal items. Rusted watches, torn photographs, and what looked like pieces of jewelry lay scattered atop faded papers, each page filled with the same frenzied writing we'd seen in the notebooks. This was a shrine, a place where the lost had left their last desperate offerings. What is this place? Hannah breathed, her voice trembling as she took in the sight. Max knelt by the altar, hesitantly picking up a photograph. His hand shook as he brushed the dust from its surface. The picture showed a group of people smiling, arms wrapped around each other, their faces frozen in an innocent joy. But their eyes seemed hollow, as if the life had already been drained from them. "They didn't make it out," he whispered, his voice cracking. They were left here." The room felt colder, the air thickening, and for a brief, horrifying moment, I thought I could see figures in the shadows, watching us. It was as if the walls themselves were alive, breathing, pulling us deeper into its grip. And then I saw it. Etched into the wall behind the altar was a new phrase, one that sent a chill down my spine. "You are the final offering. _ A low, rumbling laughter echoed through the room, the sound coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the same laughter that had followed us from the beginning, the sound that had stalked us through every corridor. But now it was louder, closer, resonating in my bones. The shadows shifted, coalescing into a familiar shape. A figure cloaked in darkness, its burning eyes fixed on us with an unholy hunger. The laughter deepened, and as it did, the walls around us began to move, closing in with a slow, grinding inevitability. "We have to go," I shouted, grabbing Hannah's hand and pulling her toward the only exit. But as we turned, we found that the tunnel we'd come through was gone, replaced by an endless wall of black stone, smooth and unyielding. Max pounded on the wall, his voice rising in panic. "No, No, this can't be happening. Hannah took a step back, her face drained of color, eyes wide and glassy. It's trapping us, just like the others. The figure stepped closer, each movement slow, deliberate, as if savoring our fear. Its eyes never left us, pinning us in place, and as it approached, I felt a sensation unlike anything I'd ever known, an emptiness, a void, as if it were draining the very life from the air around us. It raised a hand, its finger long and bony, pointing at us, and in that instant, I understood. This thing, this entity, wasn't merely haunting the tunnel. It was the tunnel, a presence that had seeped into every stone, every crack, every shadow. It was ancient, bound here, feeding off the souls of those who dared to enter. Desperation flooded me. I turned to Hannah and Max, grabbing their hands, pulling them close. There has to be a way out. There's always a way out. Max shook his head, his face pale, eyes hollow with resignation. No one's ever made it out. The lost expedition, the workers, they all vanished here. Hannah looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. We're not getting out, are we? The figure moved closer still, until it was mere inches away. I could feel its gaze burrowing into me, an intense, searing pain that clawed at my mind, threatening to rip me apart. It leaned in, its face so close that I could feel the chill of its breath, smell the decay that clung to it. In a final act of defiance, I grabbed the lantern from the altar, raising it high. I didn't know if it would hurt it, didn't know if it could even feel pain, but it was the only weapon I had. The figure stopped, its eyes narrowing as it looked at the flame. And then, to my astonishment, it stepped back, hissing, the sound like metal scraping against stone. Now, I shouted, thrusting the lantern forward. Run. The three of us surged forward, barreling past the figure as it writhed in the shadows, retreating from the light. I didn't dare look back, didn't want to see what lay behind us. All I knew was that we had to keep moving. The walls around us shifted and contorted, the tunnel warping into a twisting labyrinth. But the lantern's light cut through the darkness, guiding us forward. I felt the ground tremble beneath us, heard the distant screams of the souls trapped within, but I pushed forward, one step after the next, fighting against the oppressive weight that tried to pull us back. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the darkness broke. We stumbled out of the tunnel, collapsing onto the cold, hard ground, gasping for air, the first light of dawn stretching across the horizon. I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin, the breeze on my face, and for a moment I couldn't believe we had actually made it out. But as I looked back at the tunnel's entrance, I saw it, those same burning eyes, watching us from within, waiting, lurking in the shadows. And in that moment, I knew the truth. The Volkmarshausen Tunnel was no ordinary place. It was a prison, a gateway, an ancient entity that fed on fear, on despair, on the souls of the lost. And though we had escaped, it would remain there, waiting for the next poor soul to wander into its depths, drawn by the same dark pull that had lured us in. It would wait and it would feed,